lovely introduction to the company and to me. Then thank you to the participants in today's webinar. And we'll proceed with what we thought was an interesting topic because it has been a challenge to our company in the past year. So we thought we could present this in a way that we could discuss and open for discussion some of the multiple challenges that we faced as a pharmacovigilance provider, moving more into cosmetics and consumer product service provider as well. So what we will discuss is some of the challenges and lessons learned from the first year of the new cosmetic reporting regulations that came into effect last year in the EU. And we will kind of talk about some best practices that we can put in place to help enhance workflow and meeting of timelines that have been that are variable across different regions. Also, there's a resource impact on the different players in this new arena, and another important piece is call center and the role they play as the initial recipient of the information for cosmetovigilance cases. That term is kind of a mouthful. Cosmetovigilance is actually defined in the SUE reporting guidelines from the EU. SUE is serious undesirable effects, which is a term that is coined by the EU in relation to their new cosmetics regulation. Cosmetovigilance is defined as collection, evaluation, and monitoring of spontaneous reports of those undesirable effects that are observed during or after normal or reasonably foreseeable use of a cosmetic product. The EU says, together with other tools, cosmetovigilance contributes to the post-marketing surveillance of cosmetics. So from this definition and my role in the last 14 years at DSA, we see and have seen a parallel in pharmacovigilance, which is almost the same exact definition as the collection, evaluation, and monitoring of events, especially for us in the post-marketing arena for marketed products, meaning drugs. So what we're going to be seeing is some of those same concepts that we use in case processing for pharmacovigilance now being applied to cosmetics. Last July, the 11th of July 2013, we're coming up on that anniversary, the European community established a regulation. It came into force. Actually, it was written in 2009. It came into force on July 11th of last year. And it requires any company who manufactures or distributes cosmetics and personal care products to have in place a system to collect, evaluate, assess, monitor, investigate, and report those undesirable effects. So essentially to adequately perform post-market surveillance of their products. You also have to have in place a recall and notification system. If there's a problem with a product, you have to have a way to recall it and notify the regulatory authorities of that issue. One key concept that was established, and it's an important one, with this new regulation is the idea of a responsible person within the EEA. That is very similar to the pharmacovigilance law that came into effect in the EU and the requirement to have a qualified person in pharmacovigilance. The notion of responsible person is very similar. There has to be a legal person who is within the EU to represent and have those, be responsible basically for your product profile. And so that's a pretty significant and it's an impact to companies marketing cosmetic products in the EU. They also have to, the companies must track and monitor ingredients. And another key point is their law requires the establishment of a product information file for each marketed product. And that includes a section on the undesirable effects that may have been reported due to those cosmetics. And we'll talk about some of the even more complicated rules that have been put in place for the assessment of those events later. I have the next slide here shows definitions of cosmetics across different regulatory authorities globally, including the EU, US, Canada, and Japan. They're similar. The EU has the longest definition. The US, Canada, they're all very similar, but they also have differences. And so we'll talk about some of those differences in a few minutes as we actually present our case scenario and the challenges that these definitions actually present when you're getting real case information coming in from consumers. This definition I put separate on the slide just to put the fact and the impact of this SUE is a serious undesirable effect, and it's basically you must report anything that has a consumer reports or user reports where they've had a significant impact, hospitalization, life-threatening death, congenital anomaly. It's very similar again to the pharmacovigilance definition of serious, the regulatory definitions of serious that we deal with in the pharmacovigilance world. But there's one extra piece in there, and that's a functional, if there's a functional impact, or just similar to the disability definition in the serious criteria for pharmacovigilance. Each member of the EA must follow this regulation because it is a regulation, and that means it has the full impact of the law on each of the member states. So there's your definition of your SUE, the serious undesirable effects which result in temporary or permanent functional incapacity, and that's the little piece that's a little different than the pharmacovigilance definition of serious. The incapacity and disability piece still is the same as pharmacovigilance. Hospitalization, congenital anomaly, immediate vital risk or death aligns with the life-threatening and death serious regulatory definition. So the only one that's really a slight difference is the resulting in temporary or permanent functional incapacity. So that's a little different than the way it's worded for the serious definitions for drugs. And also the serious definition in the pharmacovigilance arena includes something called other medically serious events. So the definitions are similar but slightly different, and that will be something that does create a challenge, and we'll see where that happens in our case.